How do you just manage your time? I'm not comprehending how you do all this.
Zoom. So like I can have a Zoom meeting and I can be on the other side of the country in a different time zone.
And you got headspace for all this?
Like I said, I guess I've gotten pretty good at compartmentalizing so much of what is going on. But again, I work with really wonderful people who take up a lot of that work. This place absorbs a lot of the majority of my time and energy, of course.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the brutal question.
Yeah.
If you had to give up two of them, what would you give up? You're a writer, you're an actor, you're a director, you're a producer, you run a theater company. You got 5. You got to give up 3. What would you keep?
I'd be a writer, an actor, and a director.
That's 3. I said 2.
Oh.
No, you're right.
No, right. I can't separate that. Like I'm like, if you ever played Dungeons and Dragons, no. I'm like a fighter, magic user, cleric. I'm like 3 slashes, right? Like that's how I would describe it. Or like a thief, fighter, berserker, whatever you want to say. Like I'm a slash. I was always a writer, actor. I was a writer before I was an actor. But I didn't write plays. I wrote songs or poems or short stories.
Why? How old were you when you started to write?
About 14, 13.
And why did you start to write?
It's really silly. I always read. I was an avid reader. I read a book of short stories by Ernest Hemingway. And I thought, fuck, I could do that. And so I started writing short stories. And I just loved them because they were so masculine and so like in a way juvenile, and I just really identified with that hunter.
And were you writing consciously about Indigenous culture white culture or
just whatever?
A kid in BC who wanted to
just my feelings and thoughts and imagination and whatever. I wasn't really. I mean, I sort of I went through a whole spiritual journey in my teens. Went on a vision quest and did a lot of searching out knowledge and ceremony and things like that when I was a teenager. And that really influenced me later.
What impelled you to do that?
There was a lot of suicide in my community. Lytton at one time was the suicide capital of Canada. I think within a space of like 3 or 4 years, there was 200 suicides. 5 years maybe. It was like in the 80s, and it was after the fallout of the St. George's residential school, all of the revelations that came out of that. There was a lot of trauma in the community. There was 3 suicides, 4 suicides a month, more sometimes.
This is when you're 12, 13, 14?
Teenagers, yeah. I mean, the first suicide I remember was I was in grade 5. There was a kid that I was in elementary school with who killed himself. And so it was just an epidemic. And so part of the way in which the community began to address it was to bring in a battery of counselors, and they began to reawaken the healing traditions of my people, ceremony, sweat lodge, smudging, sharing circles. And so I became heavily involved in youth movements and things like that.
Were your parents encouraging you, or Kevin's survival mechanisms?
No, it's funny, they weren't really encouraging me, but they weren't discouraging me either. It was something that I sort of found on my own. In fact, my mom was kind of awed by it, and my dad sort of didn't really know what to think of it.
This is 1980? When are we?
1980, mid-80s. Mid-80s to early 90s. And so, I mean, when I was a teenager, I used to do these ceremonies, these warrior sweats, where you have 1 bucket of water and you don't have any rounds. You just keep pouring the water until the bucket's empty. And some of these warriors would be covered in bear grease, really intense, powerful work. A lot of healing needed to happen. And so I'm really proud of that work that I did, and